We discussed Logan Couture's injury, what that means for the center position, plus what other battles I'm watching for this training camp. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at Inside the Rink. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly a part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everyday, all you got to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can subscribe on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be talking about Logan Couture's injury, what that means for the center positions, and who is potentially could see maybe making the roster now, maybe kind of looking at where that puts these Sharks going forward. We're going to talk about the winger spots that are kind of up for grabs and where I think that kind of may land. And then look at the defensive pairings and what we saw, at least from the first day of training camp. So plenty of good stuff. Before we get into Couture's injury, how long we're expected to not have the captain around, and who might see some more playing time, I do need to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you guys by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. So make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So Logan Couture showing up at training camp today said he's week with a lower body injury that he sustained during off-season workouts. So I know everybody, all the beat writers had that. Shane, Curtis, I think Marissa was the one who tweeted out that he got hurt during off-season workouts. Maybe this is an Erik Karlsson. If you're a longtime fan of the show, Kyle and I always theorized Erik Karlsson hurt his groin. And then 9 months later, they had their first child. Logan Couture got married this summer. No, he probably actually did hurt it during training camp. So we'll see with Couture. We'll start with the Couture news and what this kind of means for the Sharks. And I think with Couture, you have to be very, very careful with this, especially with, we don't know what it is. It could be anything from, we don't know if it's a soft tissue, whatever it is. But the beginning of the season, as we know, we've discussed with the Sharks, it's brutal, right? And not having Couture is going to be bad, because Couture is one of your, 2, 3, Hurdle, I would put number 1 as your best forward. Then it's Couture, Banoff, Duclair in some order. And right. So the Sharks are going to probably lose all these games anyway. You might as well just make sure Logan Couture is healthy, because we know that he's had some issues with prolonged nagging injuries, right? I know he played every game last season, but if you remember in the weird COVID bubble season, I think he hurt his back about midway through. He tried to gut it out through the rest of the season, but he just wasn't the same player about midway through the season. He's had some other issues with injuries before. So not good with showing up to camp with an injury. And every player always says, no matter what the sport, I'm going to try to make it to the opening day, opening night, whatever, first game. Just be smart about it, right? Will you rather not have Couture for the beginning of the year when you have a lot of veterans around, and then you'd rather have Couture being on the team at the end of the season when you're going to have probably more younger players playing? Having him healthy to help these younger guys is the way to go. So that easily transitions into the center position. And this was probably going to be more of originally supposed to be more of a conversation about the 3C, but is now a conversation about both the 2 and the 3C. Hurdle, first line center, Couture, who's supposed to be the second line center. you have to prepare as if I would prepare as if Couture is not going to be there. And then if Couture is there, you can kind of just bump everyone down a slot, or pull someone out of the lineup if you need to. But the winner, if there can be any winners out of this, is Thomas Bordeleau, right? And Bordeleau played today with, and again, don't get over, not super crazy about the lines and stuff, but Bordeleau did play with Duclair and Barabanov and Hoffman and Zadina, and those are realistic lines, right? I kind of was penciling in a potential Duclair. You could easily see a Duclair Hurdle or Duclair Couture Barabanov line, having Bordeleau slide into there as playing as your 2C, and then potentially Granlund, Sturm as your 3 and your 4 is the best way to let Bordeleau get into some action and protect him. You're putting him with good players in Duclair and Barabanov, and then you're not kind of making him have to try to run a line, right? He's not the guy who has to kind of be the dude on that line. Barabanov and Duclair are both capable NHLers who can, very good NHLers, I would say, who can kind of do the work on that line and let Bordeleau kind of ease into it a little bit. So we shall see what happens with there, but another potential is Granlund, right? And I know Granlund, there's kind of the stink on Granlund with the way his season ended with the Penguins, where he was abysmal, right? And if before he was traded to the Sharks, there was talk of him being a potential cap casualty as a buyout because he was that bad with the Penguins. And yes, he was terrible with the Penguins. But like Mikael Granlund also 2 years ago was like a 60-point player playing on the Nashville Predators. And I think every player acts different to trades. We've talked about this before. Look at a guy like Zetterlund, Zetterlund going from a, potential, dark horse cup team in the New Jersey Devils to one of the worst teams in the NHL, and just was bad with the Sharks. And, everybody kind of goes through being traded a little bit different. As a quick reminder, when Granlund got traded the first time way back in the day from the Wild to the Preds, he kind of did the same thing where he only scored 5 points in 16 games. And then he had some pretty nice seasons for Nashville as he got kind of more acclimated for them. And again, like I said, 21-22 was a 64-point player with 53 assists. I think Granlund as a centerman, if you put Granlund as a centerman and surround him with some potential shooters, you might have yourself a nice little line there. Again, just not having Granlund have to kind of do the work to kind of, don't ask Granlund to do what Granlund doesn't do. And Granlund just doesn't shoot right now. But putting him with a guy like Zadina potentially, or whoever you want to put him with, I think there's a potential there. Or if you want to play Granlund putting Granlund on as your 2C, and then having him as with Duclair, who we know can shoot the puck. Barabanov, who can do a little bit of everything. Like, I think it's not as good as Couture, but you can at least squint and look at it and be like, okay, I can kind of see what you're doing here. So interesting though, if I think Bordeleau is kind of the big piece for this, right? If Bordeleau plays, you can kind of have Granlund, Sturm as your 3-4 potentially, and that's not a bad bottom pairing to centers, right? I think Granlund can provide some offense. Sturm, we know, is a good defender and also can chip in some offense as well, as we saw last season. But if you want to go more of a veteran heavy, you could go Granlund as your 2C, Sturm as your 3C, and then you have Ryan Carpenter, who the Sharks signed this offseason, is probably going to be like, again, that Andrew Agozzino role. And if you want him to play your 4C until Couture gets back, and then you can ship him back to the Barracuda if you feel like Bordeleau is maybe not ready for extended NHL time as the center. So I'm hoping if we don't see Couture, give Bordeleau a shot, right? These games are going to be tough, but if you put him as your 2C, I think you can kind of protect him a little bit by giving him good offensive zone starts. You're going to have quality wingers that you can, surround him with. That way he doesn't have to drive the line. and you can kind of keep your third and fourth lines together without having to kind of push people up into other spots. Not that I don't think Granlund can play the 2C. I think he could, play it in a pinch. And then Sturm, we know last year was the 3C and did a good job with it. So it just losing Couture really hurts your center depth because, again, he is probably your second best, third best forward, depending on how you want to rank him. But so we'll see. Don't rush Couture back. It's more important to have him in the middle of the end of the season when you start to have some of these younger players. That way they can play with a guy like Couture who can kind of do some work and let these guys kind of ease in and not have to carry the load on the line. So before we continue, we look at some of these winger positions and look at some of these very, very early kind of lines. Again, don't overreact too much. Do need to take a quick break and talk to you guys about our good friends over at Bird Dogs. And if you're like me and you just need a pair of shorts that have you covered for all occasions, that's where Bird Dogs come in. They're a stretch khakis shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg and give you a more sculpted look. They're way better than like your regular shorts that are made of strict like cotton. They have nice stretch in them, so like you feel like they're comfortable and they fit with you. Anti-stink wet wicking fabric, so they keep you cool and dry all day. And the built-in underwear. Not gonna lie, very skeptical about the built-in underwear. Amazing. Helps keep things cool, dry. You don't have bunching up that sometimes you get, especially in the hot summer. And Bird Dogs, I can wear them anywhere, right? Soccer, Saturday morning, you're running at Costco, you're running at Target, you maybe are at the brewery later on, you're cooking outside, whatever you're doing, Bird Dogs are going to make you look good while you're doing it. So going to make it super easy for you right now. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. Enter the promo code LockedOnNHL at checkout and get a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. All right, so the wing spots. And again, we don't really have much with the Sharks, right? They have 3 groups. Group A, Group B, and Group C. And as we get deeper into training camp, guys will be shifted where you'll kind of see Groups A and B are usually kind of more like the NHL guys, and maybe Group C will be more of the like Barracuda guys, and things will get shifted around. But you can kind of see a little bit of stuff, at least what David Quinn's thinking very early on. And our good friend Shang had some of the lines early. So like I mentioned earlier, we had Duclair, Barabanov playing on a line with Hurdle and Bordeleau kind of rotating as the centers. And then Zadina and Hoffman playing on a line together. I don't know if this is your top 2 lines or maybe lined 1 and 3. But easily makings of top 9 line, top, kind of top lines right there. That was at least for the Group A, part of the Group A scrimmage. We'd also kind of saw at least like that Barabanov to Claire line feels like you just can kind of see that. It's something we've kind of been circling beginning of the summer. And then it'll be interesting with Hoffman, right? If he's getting a potential look at the top 6 there, what that might do for a guy like Eklund. But I think looking at how some of these lines at least break down to begin with, it's going to be interesting with those wingers, right? And if at least at the beginning of the camp right now, if Hoffman's going to be given a potential top 6 role, I think that hurts a guy like William Eklund's chances to make the team, because I think Eklund needs to be put in a top 6 role. It's just right. Eklund is a top 6 type of player. Having him play on your third kind of checking line, defensive line, I'm not sure if that's the best use of his development. So again, try not to overread it, but at least looking at the tops, the top 9 wingers, right? Duclair is going to be a lock, right? Barabanov is going to be a lock. Those guys are playing on a line together. And then it's kind of a big mix of who kind of pops, right? Some potential guys like we said, Hoffman, Zadina, Eklund, maybe Luke Cunnin. I think Cunnin maybe was kind of probably playing down a little bit more today as well. But you also have Jacob Peterson going to be in the mix. I think he was more in the group. If I remember, he was in the group C today. But it's very intriguing with giving, I think maybe it's just a benefit of the doubt right now, giving some of these veteran guys a look in the top 6, like a Mike Hoffman. But once we get into the preseason games, which we have our first preseason game on Sunday, I can't believe it's already preseason. If Eklund's great, are we going to see the younger guys get a real shot up front? So, like looking at the groups, right? Group C, which was like the Nico Sturm group. So that was Nico Sturm, Couture was supposed to be in there, but like Eklund's in there, Granlund's in there, and maybe it's a Granlund-Eklund. If Granlund's going to be your potential 2C, getting him some used to Eklund, that could be again probably reading too much into it. But I think with these top 6 guys, like I said, I think Duclair and Barabanov are your only locks, and then it's going to be a big battle between your Zadinas, your Cunnins, your Zetterlins, your Eklunds. Like there's going to be a big battle for some of these spots here, and who gets moved from Group A to Group B or Group C, and will be intriguing, especially with Couture out, and maybe if David Quinn's trying to get some of these spots, at least get some early chemistry in camp. Again, try not to overreact too much to some of these, but didn't really see where Eklund was playing with or who he was playing with today, because I think a lot of the beat writers were covering, trying to get interviews with, Couture, which of course is the big news, Greer, David Quinn, all those guys having their availability. Didn't really get to see or hear who Eklund was playing with, I think is more importantly that. So, because that's right. We want William Eklund to make the team coming out of camp. So, and then in the bottom 6, right, who are going to be these last guys? Giovanni Smith. You have Kevin LeBanc, who's always in one coach's doghouse. Luke Cunnin, Oscar Lindblom is going to be fighting for a job. There's a lot of guys kind of fighting for jobs here. And if any of the young guys can take a spot, Daniel Gushin or Tristan Robbins. I know Robbins is probably more of a center, but I mean, same thing with Bordeleau, right? If probably more of I know they like playing center more, but would you rather play center in the AHL or play a wing on the NHL? I think they're going to take the NHL every day. So it'll be very interesting to see where these guys go. But I do like the Duclair Barabanov line, especially if Couture is potentially the center long term with them. And it's just interesting that Hoffman Zadina, is that going to be your third line? But why would you play him with Hertl? Or is that your potential first line of Hoffman, Hertl, Zadina? So, which would be good for Zadina. Having Zadina there, I would rather have Hoffman maybe a little bit further down the lineup. And Duclair Discord today, and they're there. But so before we get to the defensemen and kind of early look at the pairings there, which guys are going to be really fighting for these last couple spots. Do want to thank you guys, of course, for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Again, proudly a part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. We'll be back on Monday. We'll recap what happened in the Sharks' first preseason game. Definitely overreact to the lines there and which players played, which players didn't, who looked good. And then we're going to, of course, next week we'll have our stock up, stock down. Maybe after the first couple preseason games, we'll talk about some of the prospects this year and where they're going to be playing and kind of what to look for. Just kind of a nice reminder of who's playing where and what the prospects is. This is going to be probably a bad season for the Sharks, but we'll keep an eye on the prospects like we do here at Locked On Sharks. So make sure you guys are following wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. All right, so the defensive pairings. So again, Shang with on it. So here, at least for Group A and Group B, some of the defensive pairings. So you had Knizhov Benning. We know Benning locked to make the roster. Shimmick McDonald, both those guys fighting for a job there. And then Furlong, Cagnoni. Both those guys are also, those guys are here just to kind of get some experience. We both know that they're going to be going back to their respective junior teams. But the Knizhov Benning, just a little interesting out of the gate there, especially with Knizhov, who is fighting for an NHL job this season. So on one of the other groups, Ferraro Gawanke, interesting there. Again, Ferraro lock to make the team. And Gawanke, who's got a lot of offensive upside, which is something most of these other NHL caliber goal or defensemen just do not have. Sorry, guys, but Gawanke has put up good production in the AHL and can run a power play. So looks like they're at least going to give him a fair shot playing with Ferraro. I think that's a fine. I would love to see that pairing right there. Then you have Kyle Burrows playing with I practice Ahochiak, the defenseman there. Again, I think seeing Ahochiak, how he is coming back from injury, pretty, I like that pairing too. A little bit more rough and tumble there. And then Cicek Larac. Cicek probably going to be in the Barracuda, and Larac, who's fighting, wants to be a Barracuda, wants to play a professional this season. I think, let's see what Larac does in a preseason game here and how he can kind of, maybe if he handles himself and looks like a professional already. So I like these. I can't really argue with any of these. Don't have the group C. Again, we didn't really get too much for the group C. So hopefully tomorrow we'll get a little bit more eyes on the group C, and over the weekend, a little bit more eyes on the group C. But it's interesting that we're seeing a lot of guys, paired with, Ferraro paired with, Gawanke, who's fighting for an NHL job, right? Seeing, Knizhov paired with a Benning, Knizhov who's fighting for an NHL job. Maybe it's just to try to see how these guys look with these different partners, and then, see if they kind of pop a little bit. But, going into this, right, it's, everyone talks about like, well, this guy should play, Henry Thrun. We didn't even talk about Thrun and Vlasic, who, in Group C, like all these guys should play. But I mean, you have 6 spots, right? You can't just have 10 defensemen on your roster, right? You have 6 guys who play, and usually one who's a healthy scratch that's going to be sitting in the press box most nights. And if you're the Sharks, having young guys like a Knizhov or a Thrun be your 7th defenseman is not the best. Yes, you get to go be in the NHL, but you're not playing, right? And the best way to get better is to play. So I think a guy like Shimmick or McDonald is like a perfect 7th defenseman. They're professionals. They've been around the league long enough. If you need them, you need them to sit for a couple of weeks while everyone is healthy and plays, or if they need to come in a spot, like, fine, right? None of these guys are going to, sorry, Shimmick fans. None of these guys are long-term. Both these guys are in the last year of their deal. None of these guys are long-term candidates for the Sharks. Like, who cares if they're not playing, right? And they can come in a pinch if you're on a long road trip. Can't recall anybody. You need them to come in and play. They can come in and do an adequate job. But again, so just looking at the numbers, right? Vlasic, lock, right? That salary says he is a lock. And he played, if you don't look at his contract, he played okay last year, right? He was perfectly fine, just overpaid, but he was fine defensively. So he's a lock, right? Mario Ferraro, lock, right? Especially with this, he's the 2nd highest paid defenseman on the team. Jan Ruda, haven't even mentioned yet. Potential, but I still think he's still one of your 6 best defensemen. So we're at 3. Matt Benning, lock, right? You added him last year. He was good for you. Kyle Burrows, you just brought in this year. That's 5. We have 5 kind of 4 locks, and then most likely in Jan Ruda, right? Who's again like you have one spot that you have to try to fill with either Knyzhov, McDonald, Šimik, Thrun are your main guys right there. And that doesn't even say like Mukmadulin or Cicek or Gawanke. Like it's going to be tough, I think, for some of these young guys to kind of make that jump, especially when you look at a guy like Henry Thrun, who's still waivers eligible, like waivers exempt. Like he can go play in the Barracuda this year without a problem. I don't think any of these guys are going to. I think it's gonna be tough for some of these guys to make the team right out of camp. And I mean, the Sharks are probably they're gonna have to pare down one of these defensemen anyway. So a McDonald or a Šimik or whoever doesn't make it is gonna have to go through waivers to go play in the Barracuda or be potential trade bait. Maybe if a team loses a defenseman in training camp and they don't feel great about their sixth defenseman. 6th or 7th defenseman, they want a little bit more insurance, then you can maybe look at trading a Šimik or some a Šimik or Ruda or a McDonald because their contracts are okay-ish. Šimik in the last year of his deal at $2.25 million, and Jan Ruda, who I know just showed up here, he's got 2 years left at 2.75, and then McDonald, who's making vet min basically. For 1 year, if you're trying to kind of maybe potentially add some insurance. But again, that's a lot of if this happens and this happens and this happens, then you might be able to trade one of these guys. So I think we're going to see some of the young guys start the year. So I think Knyzhov playing with Benny is a good sign for Knyzhov. Again, not waivers exempt and would have to pass through waivers to go play with the Barracuda this season. And I think Knyzhov, I know he's been coming back from some injuries and hasn't kind of gotten all the way back. But if you put him on waivers, I would be worried that someone would try to grab him. So I think as of right now, we'll see how the rest of training camp goes, but I think he's your favorite potentially. I think he's your favorite to be the 6th defenseman, at least roster spot wise. And then, so if I had to, again, weird pairings right now, but we'll go with fudge. We'll go Benny Knyzhov, right? We'll go Burroughs Vlasic. Ferraro, who am I missing here? Ferraro Ruda, I guess, would be your pairings potentially, with Šimik as your 7th defenseman, and then McDonald. I think you can probably slide if you send him to waivers and somebody claims him, then oh well. So at least that's how we're gonna handicap it very, very early in this process. So, but that's gonna be it for today. We're here. We're at training camp. Sunday, we have our first preseason game against the Golden Knights. So definitely, like I said, we'll be back on Monday for a full overreaction to that game. Going to record right after the game and drop it right in your feeds right away. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. You can also follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Locked On Sharks. You can follow me on Twitter and Threads at My Fry Hole. And until Monday, bye, friends.